Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is a beautiful sunny day here in suburban Chicago. It is Wednesday, June 23rd, and I am happy to be talking to you here in the sunny day. Yep, I couldn't find the end of that sentence, but it arrived. I was trying to figure out what I should do my podcast about and thinking back to the very pleasant and enjoyable game time that I had yesterday at Toggle Gaming, and I realized, wasn't there a question about this? So I went and looked in my list of questions that people have asked over on Board Game Geek and Guild 3269, the Pick Up and Deliver Guild, where you too could ask a question if you wanted. You just post in the questions and answers forum, or make a new thread for questions and answers if you wanted. Or you could email me, Brendan at Rattlebox Games, or send me a direct message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username. But anyway, and now I regret that I did not write down the name of the user who asked this. I think it was Chris Graves. If it was not Chris Graves, I apologize to the user who did ask this. But someone asked me to tell the story of Nellie's. I've often mentioned my board game club that I attend. In the recent episodes, I've been very excited to mention that my board game club is back in person. That was very exciting. And so I thought that I would tell a little bit of a story about how I came to be going there and how that came to be part of my life. So I've picked out 5 gaming moments I want to share and 5 moments in the story of my experience at Nellie's. So I'll start with the moments in my experience at Nellie's. It began during ValorCon 2015. A friend of my design partner Rob and I went to this game convention here in Chicago, which was mostly video games, but had room for tabletop, and they had tables you could rent for relatively cheap, and we had just launched our Kickstarter, and so we had a table set up where people could try out Cromlech, the game that we published with Rattlebox Games, and we had it on Kickstarter, and so we went there to show it off. While we were there, we met a couple guys, Andrew and Jeff, who had just started their own gaming concern, and they were publishing a game called Road to Infamy. They later became R2I Games, publishing games like Crypt and Canvas is their recent one, which has been a big hit for them. Well done, fellas. Anyway, one of the people who was there hyping them up and keeping them company was a guy named Scott. And Scott was telling us about how he knew them from a local game club in suburban Chicago called Toggle Gaming. Now, this game club met at a bar, and we said, well, that sounds fun. We should start going there. So at that point, the game club had been meeting about 3 years, I believe. So it's still relatively new compared to now, but well established. And it was shortly after that Rob and I began going to Toggle somewhat regularly. I think I went, for a while I was going, every other week or maybe every third week. I wasn't certainly going every week, but I was going somewhat regularly. And then over time, we just started going more and more often until the point where we were going every week. So that's how I started going to Toggle Gaming. I know I haven't told you anything about it yet, but we've got time. So, a gaming moment. I wanted to mention one of my favorite things to do at Toggle is pre-arrange to play a big game. When I say a big game, an elaborate game, a game that's got heft and depth, something that takes a little bit more effort and perhaps a little bit more time to play. And in that regard, I like to do that at Toggle kind of every other week. It's sort of my standard loadout there. So one of the games I've played several times at Toggle, and I always have a great time when I do, is Anachrony. Anachrony is the worker placement game designed by David Turksey, Richard Amon, and Victor Peter from Mind Clash Games. It's got these beautiful miniatures, and it's a huge table hog. When we're going to play Anachrony, I have to make sure to get there early enough to grab one of the bigger tables, and I get it all set up, usually in time to start the game around 7, and then we have to really hustle to make sure that we finish the game on time. In the past, we planned to start at 7, and then I had to do a teach, and then after the teach, then we played, and it was like a 4-player game, and we would play till 11:30, 11:45, and the bar closed at midnight. It occurs to me that if I want to play that same game Now, I'm gonna have to be extra attentive because the bar is only open till 11. So that might keep Anachrony off the Toggle gaming table, perhaps. But I've done that a couple times, and every time I just have a blast. It's really fun. It does highlight for me, however, how poorly the color palette for the original resources were, because the grays and the purples look so similar that you can't tell. It's really hard to tell them apart. Unless you put two of them right next to each other, then you can tell which one is purple. But on their own, the gray and the purple they both look kind of gray or purple. Anachrony is one of my favorite games to play at Toggle Gaming. So here's what you see when you walk into Toggle Game. The second thing I want to talk about is the game library. When I started going to Toggle, so Toggle is held in the upstairs of a bar called Nellie's. It used to be called Dirty Nellie's during the COVID break when they had to shut down, as everybody did. They had a rebrand. It's now called Nellie's Gastropub and Entertainment Venue. Blah. I mean, Dirty Nellie's was a terrible name. I mean, you don't want to go eat at a place called Dirty something. But I don't know that Gastropub describes it. Anyway, Nellie's, they should have just called it Nellie's. Anyway, so it's called Dirty Nellie's. And when you come in the main floor, there's a bar and a big restaurant area. Then you go up the stairs, and in the upstairs, there's a big second room with a whole bunch of tables and another bar and its own bathroom, and there's a balcony out back where you could go and hang out at outside tables. When I first started going to Toggle there, we would go, and when you get there, there would be a couple sort of long tables like the kind you'd find, at a Magic the Gathering tournament or whatever, where all the people would sit, these long tables across from each other. And they would be covered with games, full of games, dozens of games, which was a really neat way to encounter a game club. Like, you would go and you wouldn't have to bring your own games. There'd just be dozens and dozens of games there. It was excellent. And then something after after I'd been there maybe a year and a half, Andrew and Kevin, the two founders of the club, revealed a project they'd been working on, which is they bought several IKEA Billy bookshelves. I think they were Billy. It might have been one of the other brands. Several IKEA bookshelves. And they mounted them on legs with casters on the bottom, and they put LED lights inside, and they made lighted game library cabinets. And boy, it just looks really sharp. If you're interested in seeing it, head over to togglegaming.com and you can see pictures of the game library there. It's a really welcoming and excellent way to kind of make it clear this is something special. We have this elaborate, lovely presentation setup for our games, and it works great. There's a space in the basement of the bar where the bar lets us keep our games, so nobody has to haul games back and forth, although at least a third of the people who come to Nellie's on any given night bring a couple games with them. Some people bring a whole box full of games or a whole bag full of games or Tupperwares full of games, which is kind of funny because you really, unless you're very aggressive, you probably don't have time to play more than 2 or 3 games in a night unless you're playing all short stuff. So bringing half a dozen games is funny, but that's often what happens. So the collection is lovely to look at and pleasant to play. And it's easier to take up and put down now. It used to take, I guess, a half an hour to an hour to gather up to bring up the Tupperwares, set out all the games, and at the end of the night, put all the games back in the Tupperwares and haul them all back downstairs. It used to be a really arduous process. And having access to the storage closet now is a really nice way, and these rolling shelves is a really nice way to be able to, we can get out the library in about 15 minutes and put it away in about 15 minutes, and without much arduous work. So we're actually at the point now where we have to figure out some new shelves. Those shelves have they're starting to fall apart a little, and we've outgrown them. Our library has outgrown them. So, interesting things to think about. Okay, next gaming moment I want to talk about. This is a short one. So, one of the things that's really great at Toggle, especially toward the end of the night usually, is playing social deduction games. Usually around 10 p.m., a group of people will coalesce around one of the big long tables, usually 7 or 8 people, and they'll pick out a social deduction game to play. Often the Resistance or Secret Hitler are the two that show up most of the time, but sometimes it's your Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Sometimes it's Donner Dinner Party. You never know. Lots of different options. One of my favorite experiences was there was one night where game designer Don Eskridge, who has since moved overseas, but was at the time still living in the Chicago area, came to Nellie's, as he did occasionally, and somebody invited him to play a game of The Resistance with the group. Of course, he is in fact the designer of The Resistance, so getting to play that game with him was pretty exciting. He early on in the game, it became clear to me that he was one of the bad guys because he accused me of lying when I wasn't lying. So I knew he was lying, so I had to spend the rest of the game telling everybody he was lying, which was really fun to call him a liar and have him call me a liar. And yeah, it was a good time. So just getting to play The Resistance with Don Eskridge at Toggle Gaming is certainly one of my favorite things. All right, the third thing I wanted to share was the Toggle Code of Conduct. So we have at various times talked at Toggle about organizing the group into a more coherent and long-standing organization. In the early days, the game library was just games that belonged to Kevin and Andrew, the two founders. As time went on and other people got involved, Kristen got involved, and Scott and Rob and I and several other people, we came to get a number of games, quite a few games in fact, from game companies as promotional items to try to get, try to expose people to our games and get sales and whatnot. And so the game library now is pretty large and requires some upkeep occasionally. We will add new games to the library. There's also the shelves. And so there was an element of trying to be a bit more organized. We redid the website, so that's more robust. We manage the announcements a little more carefully now, and generally just do more of the work of making the group seem a bit more formalized. We've had a number of initiatives to try to elaborate that formalization. We have name tags for the people who help organize to make us a little easier to spot. We've tried doing like new member nights and a variety of things. But two things that we've added that I wanted to share were a newsletter and a code of conduct. So I'm really happy with the code of conduct that we created, which generally it says we are welcoming and tolerant. We don't allow any kind of discriminatory behavior or hateful speech, and we don't charge anything for our events. You are encouraged to spend money at the venues where we hold our events, because usually we don't pay for them. Usually we're getting the venue for free with the idea that we're going to spend money at the place. Yeah, and so sort of formalizing the code of conduct and hanging it up it's a big part of the maturing of the organization that I've really liked. And going along with that is the newsletter that I created. So there was some talk about how to try to make the organization feel a bit more official. And so one of the things we talked about, and I've led the way on, is created a newsletter called the Toggle Times that comes out irregularly. And in the best world, it's coming out once a month. And there have been stretches where I came out once a month. But like during the pandemic, it was really hard to keep going because there was nothing to write about because we weren't playing games at Toggle. And at least not in the same way. But now that we're meeting back again, I'm trying to bring it out once a month. I had the new issue ready for our first day. And that's been really kind of a hobby labor of love. Interesting writing to do each month. It's been difficult because I don't really have much help on it except for Rob. Rob writes horoscopes for the newsletter, or I should say he consults with Master Aiko Sagan about the horoscopes. And other than that, it's been mostly me writing the pieces. So it does take a fair amount of work to get the newsletter together. Generally, I've had the newsletter be 4 pages. But with sort of regular features, it's not too hard to make it work. The nice thing about the newsletter is, like I said, it makes me feel like we're a bit more official or formal, that we have this organized presence. And when new members come and I'm able to say, here, you should take our newsletter, that feels really good. Having a newsletter that people can look at on paper that feels organized in a way that it might not otherwise. All right, another gaming moment. I guess one of the gaming moments I want to talk about is Artemis Bridge Simulator. So there is this thing called Artemis Bridge Simulator. It is a computer game that was created to sort of function sort of like the Starship Enterprise. Like when you are playing the Artemis Bridge Simulator, you are one of the officers on the bridge of a ship like the Starship Enterprise. You have various tasks that you're in charge of, and your goal is to help your ship achieve some sort of goal within a certain amount of time. The part I really like about it, each person plays on their own laptop and has their own screen that they're seeing, but you have to communicate out loud with your partners who each have a different thing that they're seeing. And the way that Rob sets it up when he sets it up is that we have a projector, so you can see sort of a big image of something cool that we're doing, and then you have the variety of different screens that you're using. It's a fun time. And when we've often brought it out at our bigger events, what we call Toggle Top Day, twice a year we'll have a large event that people can attend. And that has been really well received by the game community, especially by the people who have kids, who are bringing their kids to the event and showing and having them play the game. It works out really nicely. So it's been, in particular, I remember bringing my son to one of the Toggle Top Day events, and he really got into the Artemis Bridge Simulator, and he and a couple other boys played it over and over again for at least an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and it worked out really nicely. So I've enjoyed playing that and seeing it played, seeing this sort of slightly different and special thing that we're able to bring to the big events like the Toggle Top Day. That works out really nicely. I like it. All right, so the last event that I wanted to mention here is the fire, the story of the fire. So as I mentioned in various podcasts before, in fact, if you've been listening a long time, you went through this in real time. The week of one of our Toggle Top Days, in fact, like 3 days before it, there was a fire at Dirty Nellie's. Apparently the fire started in the kitchen and spread through part of the building. The fire department had to go in and spray everything down, and nobody was hurt, but the restaurant and bar were gutted, and they had to do repairs and cleaning that took 6 months or something. That was very scary. We know that some of our friends who worked at the bar were in the building when it happened. It was a dramatic moment. We also had the sort of fear that our game library might have been destroyed, right? It was in the building. Fortunately, it was on the other end of the building from where the fire happened, and the way the building was set up, there wasn't even any water that got near the collection. So, small mercies, I guess. But of course, Nellie's had to close down during those repairs, and so we were scrambling to find other ways for the game group to meet. In particular, we were looking for another way for the game group to meet that Saturday because we had this big in-person event planned. We talked about canceling it, but it turned out that the American Legion, where we have a couple Toggle members who are part of the American Legion, had a room that we could use. We had a rental, we rented it, and then they let us come and have our Toggle Top Day there. It was a really nice alternate option, and we had very good turnout, especially because we didn't have the game library, right? As part of Toggle Top Day, we had to say to people, hey, can you please bring some games to share with people because we won't have the game library there. And it worked out great. Several people brought big storage Tupperwares full of games that allowed them to share games with other people. And as a result, we had plenty of games for people to play and lots of fun that day. And that began what was a very interesting and helpful relationship with the American Legion. And the American Legion in Palatine is just up the road from Nellie's, maybe 2 blocks away. So for people who are used to going to that area, the American Legion is not out of the way. It's easy to find, decent parking. It's a little smaller, but generally when we went to another venue, we didn't have as many people show up. The American Legion didn't have food in the same way, so we didn't have to worry about buying food from Nellie's as much, but it also meant people couldn't eat there. I mean, you were allowed to bring food in, but they did ask if you bought any drinks that you go down to the bar and buy drinks and snacks from the bar. They had like bar snacks, like chips and candy. Yeah, so the American Legion on the day of Toggle Top Day really saved our butts. And then in the follow-up, to Nellie's having been being closed, we started meeting at the Legion every Tuesday night. And they did us a really big favor. They didn't charge us to use the space because it was a Tuesday night and nobody was using that space anyway. And then they did make a little extra money because our members would go and spend money at the bar. And it worked out great. It was really nice of them to let us come and use the space, and it meant a lot to have that available to us. And then after it was repaired, I have one of my favorite memories of Toggle is the first night back at Nellie's after the fire. We had well over 100 people show up. We had to do overflow gaming down on the concert venue hall, and it was just incredible. Everybody was so happy to be back in the space. It was similar to our first in-person meeting after COVID. That was a longer session of not having any in-person meetings, so it's not surprising we had a smaller turnout. But those moments when we're able to return to the space and share the time together really meant a lot and really helped highlight how important that community is for the people who are in it, and what it means to have a robust game community like that. Which one brings me to my favorite gaming moment in my time at Toggle. And this was something that we did at the Toggle Top Day event that ended up being at the American Legion. We had a pandemic survival tournament. We had, as a prize, we had the 10th anniversary deluxe edition of Pandemic that came in like the metal case with painted figurines and stuff as the prize. And what we did is I emailed Z-Man, and I was able to get from them one of the digital files for one of the old Pandemic Survival events. Now what Pandemic Survival is the players all have preset Pandemic decks, and then they play through them all at the same time in pairs. You're always playing a 2-player game, and you play through them, and you get the same results get revealed each time, and so on. So what you get is this really great experience of a shared Pandemic game where you're all playing the same Pandemic game, and the goal is to see who can survive the longest or win the game first. In our case, it was who survived the longest. One by one, the groups failed out until we had only one group left. They did not win either, but they did manage to survive the longest. It was super fun, really engaging thing, a special thing. It was fun watching people play that and helping run it. My favorite moment in my experience with Toggle Gaming. So if you're one of the Chicagoland local listeners and you think this sounds like a blast, I encourage you to come out on Tuesday night to Palatine, to Nellie's Gastropub, and join us. Or on Saturday, June 10th, we're going to be having our day-long Toggle Top Day event. I hope that you're able to come join us for that, because that would be amazing. We'd love to see you. Well, I would love to hear on Board Game Geek your experiences of your game clubs. What are some of your favorite memories? What makes your game club so great? And this could be just, a group of friends that meets somewhat regularly. It could be a bigger organized group like Toggle. Let me know. Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and post in the comments there. Let me know your experiences. Well, thanks for joining me today on my walk. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.